Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
You are, no doubt, familiar with the housing crisis. Too many people, not enough homes, especially in big cities like Toronto, where prices are out of control and bidding wars erupt as soon as something hits the market. The first part of all that is still very much true. The second part, maybe not anymore.
More than 8,000 condos in the GTA were listed back in May. That's the highest number of units on the market for any month in recent history.
Those condos that are sitting on the market, right now, they're still priced as though the bidding war will erupt at any moment. But there's not even a bidding skirmish. There are no bids at all for most of these places. Why does nobody want Toronto condos? Does this mean those prices are about to crash? Is this a unique situation born of post-pandemic realities? Or is it the canary in the coal mine for the Canadian housing bubble? I'm Jordan Heath-Rawlings. This is The Big Story. Diana Zlomislic is the housing reporter for the Toronto Star. Hey, Diana.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Just tell us, broadly, to start, how many condos are currently on the market in Toronto right now, and how does that compare to what we've seen in past years?
So the data that we have through the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board is active as of May. So as of last month, we're seeing 8,183 active resale listings on the condo market. So these are condominium apartments that are being resold, not brand new ones. There's a separate problem with the brand new pre-construction condos.
Is that way up, way down from what we've seen?
It's an all-time high, Jordan. Since TREB started tracking this figure back in 1988, it hasn't reached this level. It's come close, though, I should say. 2020, there was about 7,600 on the market.
And what do we know about, I guess, the demographics here, or just the lifestyles in general? Who is selling all these condos? Are these flippers? Are these professionals moving up, or what?
Well, from what I've gathered from my real estate sources, they're telling me that the majority are investor-owned, that they're currently sitting vacant, and that they're investors who are just looking to get out of the market. They waited a little bit too long to sell. But I've also heard of singles and young couples that are trying to move up in the real estate game, that want a little bit more space, and they're trying to offload now, and it's just really bad timing.
Why are all these condos going unsold? We have record numbers in immigration. We have an ongoing housing crisis. There's incredible demand for housing, as anybody looking at the city will tell you, but there's 8,000 condos sitting empty?
There are 8,183 condos sitting empty because it's this crossroads of high mortgage rates still. Yeah, we had a rate reduction just recently, but it's still not enough to get buyers off the sidelines. People are nervous. And also it's about, they're being pickier. There's such a glut of condos that people are taking their time to figure out what they want to live in, how they want to live. And we're also seeing an exodus of people from Toronto leaving the city who are just done. I think it's also another factor is fewer people have to work in offices downtown Toronto. And we've seen Olivia Chow trying to urge companies to bring their people back to those big commercial buildings. One realtor said, I can't see why anybody would want to live in Toronto unless they work in Toronto. And if they're not working in Toronto, then what's the reason to live in Toronto? I think that's maybe a debate for another podcast, but I think that really plays into what we're seeing here. If you don't have to physically be here, then, why not live somewhere where you could have more space and better affordability?
When or if, I guess, these condos do move, how long is it typically taking them to sell? And are people just taking a loss to get rid of the property, or are they just holding it?
So we're not at the fire sale stage yet. It's taking about 3.5 to 4 months to sell a condo in this market, which realtors are saying is still, quote, a balanced market. It's not territory where people are getting so desperate that they're going to slash the prices just to get out of the game. Some have, but that's few and far between at the moment. So the big question is, how long will it take for things to flip? And I think what happens with the central bank, whether they continually reduce the lending rate over the next several months heading into the end of the year, that will make a huge difference to buyers coming back, to prices actually increasing.
How does that time period, the 3.5, 4 months, compare with the heyday of condos in Toronto when, buildings were going up all over the place?
I mean, that was just a few years ago, right? 2022 was a super hot market, and people bought because they knew that they could get in, especially on pre-construction. They could get in, pay very little down, and make $150,000, $200,000. Their property would be sold within a week. And I think that was what drew so many people, investors, specifically speculators, into the market.
Let's talk about what draws those investors in. And in particular, you wrote about this in the Star, the type of condos that we're seeing sitting empty on the market.
Right. So they are generally smaller units, not the micro size, but what we've seen is a 49% increase in condos in the 500 to 599 square foot range. And they have increased by nearly 50% last month compared to the year prior. Most families aren't buying into this. I mean, unless you're very creative with how you use your space, it's really meant for a single person or a couple. If you can afford to purchase a home that's almost $600,000 on your own, fantastic news, but very few people can actually do that, right?
When we look at what Toronto has done, and I guess most of the cities in Canada have done recently when they talk about taking on the housing crisis, building condos has kind of been seen as our go-to way out of this. What does this trend mean to that approach?
I've talked to politicians and realtors and homeowners alike who are just very disappointed in the type of building that's occurring right now. They want to see larger homes. They want to see more affordable homes. And the investor condo delivers none of that. And so, the NDP, for example, reached out to me after the story was published and said the province has these collective agreements with municipalities across Ontario, right? Each municipality has a target of building a certain number of homes. They want to get to this collective magic number of 1.5 million homes built by 2031 over the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. So the NDP is saying, well, that's great. Can we use the power that the province has and deliver a very specific type of housing that people need rather than just saying any type of house will do? The province, for its part, tells me, well, we are trying to do a balanced approach to housing. It doesn't feel like that right now. When you look at Toronto's skyline, like you can see very clearly how it's changed over the last few years. And it's a very vertical direction, right? And vertical is not bad, but it's just about the size and what people want to and need to live in.
So far, we've been discussing the glut of resale condos on the market. What are we seeing in terms of the new ones that are coming online? And what does that mean for the condos that are being built in our skyline right now?
Yeah, so developers are having a really tough time moving brand new product at the moment. The pre-construction condo market is down 74% last month compared to a 10-year average. And people are just nervous to get into this. As I said, a couple of years ago, you could buy a pre-construction condo and be almost certain that you would see $150,000, $250,000 profit on that purchase. You could put 5% down initially and then, get up to that 20% mark before you ultimately flipped it without even having to get a tenant. Someone was just ready and willing and waiting and hungry to make that their next investment, but that's just not what's happening right now. And builders, developers are getting a bit desperate and they're trying all these various creative ways to lure people into these buildings, but buyers just aren't qualifying for the mortgages that they need to purchase even these investments at a 5% deposit.
What does that mean for the people who have already purchased units in these new builds and the developers now can't find renters or can't find owners for the rest of the units? Does that stop the process, slow it down? What happens?
I think there's a variety of scenarios here. And in some cases, developers have offered people to come in and rent to buy, where they have, an agreement that there's a certain percentage that they pay monthly and that ultimately will let them own it at some point in the distant future. But some developments are going bust and people are losing their money, and it's not a good time right now.
If you are one of those resellers on the market right now, and you're looking at that 3.5 to 4 month wait, and maybe that's a long time, or you need to sell this place because you've bought a larger home. Is there anything you can do that agents are saying to cut down that time short of dropping the price significantly?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So you have to be, as a seller, prepared to, I think, spend a little bit more money than you maybe initially would have a couple of years ago. So staging is critical at the moment. Buyers want something that will stand out and look different and more appealing. So you spend the money on getting, that good furniture look in, making sure that the rooms look as spacious as possible. The challenge, though, is that in some of these units, they still have tenants. While many are vacant properties or investor-owned, there are still tenants living in them. And so there's really some limitations as to what a buyer can do when you have that. Like, for example, one of the units that I wrote about at Jarvis and Dundas that has not had a single bite of interest over the span of the last 2.5 months, they have reduced the price $21,000. And it's just below the market average of $593. But they have tenants, and tenants have personalities in terms of how they decorate, and you really can't get around that.
What are buyers doing? I mean, the few buyers, I guess, that there are out there, how are they leveraging the market?
This is a time for buyers. I mean, they are free to be as picky as they want to be, and they should be at the moment. There's never been more selection for people who are interested in getting into the condo market. And they should ask for whatever they want. This is even coming from realtors themselves. The clients may say no, but they should ask for price reductions. They should ask for new flooring, fresh wall paint, different electrical fixtures. This is the time to ask.
How does this compare, just for reference, to the current state of the actual, housing market in the city? Like, is it totally stark? Are we starting to see this downturn in homes?
We did last month see an overall drop in home sales. So there was about 21% fewer homes sold in May compared to the year prior. And the inventory overall, not just condos, but all homes, is actually up 21% year over year. But condos on their own as a group of homes stands out in terms of the difficulty in trying to move this particular product.
If interest rates do keep falling, as I know a lot of people listening to this are probably hoping they do, is that a possible way out of this? Will that spur the condo market back to activity? Or is it just a different city than it was pre-pandemic with different needs?
I love that question because it could go in any direction. I mean, okay, let's say the rates continue to go down. Then what happens is the prices go up. Will somebody qualify at a higher price? Maybe. Will that sort of stop this flatlining that we're seeing? It's hard to say. I mean, realtors believe that it's going to come to an end and that the market will flow again. And I mean, I think history has shown that we have these ups and downs and that everything is cyclical, and we're just in a bad time at the moment. And maybe in a month or 2 or 3 months, things will turn around. I want to believe that.
Well, this is my last question then, and it's basically like, what happens if it doesn't? You mentioned off the top that, we're not at that fire sale collapse point yet, so maybe the bubble hasn't truly popped, but how long can it continue like this before people just have to take what they can and exit the market?
Yeah. So at the moment, the reason that we're not seeing the fire sales is because investors have built up some equity in the units that they own. And when that equity starts to increasingly diminish to the point where they're not even going to be able to get any return on this, I mean, that's when the trouble starts. I think most people are willing to ride it out to the end of the year, but the early part of 2025, if things still haven't shifted by then, I think that it's fair to say that we will start seeing those fire sales, that prices will be slashed and investors aren't going to get the returns anywhere close to what they hoped for. They're just going to be thankful to get out.
Thanks so much for this, Diana.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Diana Zlomislic, housing reporter with the Toronto Star. That was the big story. You can, of course, find more big stories by heading to our website, which is thebigstorypodcast.ca. If you've got something to say to us about this episode, about another episode, or if you've got a story idea for us, you can find us by emailing hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or by calling us and talking it out on a voicemail, 416-935-5935. The Big Story is in every single podcast player and every single smart speaker, as long as you remember to ask it to play the Big Story podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Jordan Heath Rawlings. We'll talk tomorrow.